Alright guys, today I'm bringing you a legendary item guide in Borderlands 3, and in this video we'll be looking at the Manual shotgun known as the Vosk's Deathgrip. The red text on the weapon reads, "A good death is its own reward." And what's special about this weapon is it has two firing modes. The default firing mode will shoot out 6 projectiles that travel a very short distance before beaming together, dealing some devastating damage to anything inside of it. And the secondary firing mode is known as Vosk's Grasp, which will fire out a projectile a very short distance, much like the other firing mode, before ultimately stopping in place and creating a singularity which will pull in nearby enemies, and this firing mode will recharge every 6 seconds. This weapon was introduced as one of the MH4 exclusive weapons with a recent big update, which means in order to get it from its source you will need to be playing in MH4. For anyone on PC who doesn't feel like farming, there is a save file in the description with a corrosive version of the weapon included, but for everyone else you want to head over to the Great Vault on Pandora, as we'll be farming Troy Calypso on MH4 in order to have a chance for this weapon to drop. I very much recommend you go into this fight somewhat equipped, but even better, properly equipped, just to make the runs as quick as possible to raise your chances in terms of how many runs you're doing per minute. Because the quicker you're able to get the runs done, the more chances you'll be able to have of rolling this weapon in dropping. Like I mentioned, I got this weapon to drop in corrosive, which would have been annoying before the DLC, but because the DLC has been released and it's primarily armored enemies, I was able to put effective use to this weapon. However, this weapon can be a frustrating mess to deal any damage with, and this is because the projectiles fired will only travel a few feet before freezing in place and beaming. This means for enemies that move a lot, you'll have to find a way to stagger them enough to get the lasers to land on them in order to deal the damage. To do this, you can actually fire the projectiles and have them set up and dealing damage, then use the Vosk's Grasp firing mode in the center of the lasers in order to pull nearby enemies to the damage, as not only will they stagger traveling towards the singularity, they'll also stagger as they get up, giving the lasers plenty of opportunity to deal damage while the enemy is flopping around. However, that is easier said than done. If the enemy is just on the edge of the pulling distance, the enemy will flop in and more often than not come back on itself to throw itself out of the singularity, which usually results in the enemy being outside of the lasers. On the other end of the scale, if the enemy is too close, then they'll move towards the singularity really slowly, which will usually result in them reaching the lasers as they begin to despawn. From what I saw of this weapon when it was released, it seemed like you were able to stick enemies with the projectiles to make your life a lot easier with the weapon, as it would allow you to get massive damage without worrying about if the enemy would walk out of the lasers or trying to get them into it. However, when I tried this, the projectiles seem to pass through the enemies, meaning they can't physically stick to them anymore, and you're forced to use the weapon the way it was intended. I don't know if this is a version of the gun I got not allowing for it to happen, or a version I saw allowing for the projectiles to stick to enemies, but that's all I know for the moment. A final heads up on the firing modes is that if any of them hit a surface before stopping in place and doing their effect, they will explode, which will result in them disappearing and not fulfilling their effect. So make sure you fire the weapon at eye level or higher to especially avoid hitting the floor, and in an open area to avoid hitting anything else. Other than that, I'm sure this gun could be good in a very specific build, so if any of you guys have ideas for such a build, I'd recommend you getting this weapon, but apart from that, in my opinion, it felt like a time-consuming farm in order to get a painful to use weapon, so overall my opinion would be to don't bother. But other than that, that's it for the video guys. I hope you found this useful. Make sure to subscribe for future legendary item guides on my channel, and yeah, see you in the next video.